Audio unleashed.
All right, you ready to rock, bud?
I am ready to rock. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, man, let's make a podcast. We got some good stuff today, but I want to start off with something that I got to admit I don't quite understand. This is another article from Headphone Sty, as we call them. Veteran speaker designer reveals the top 3 reasons why designers can't build great speakers anymore. Boy, there are a lot of assumptions built into that headline, but this is another.
Yeah.
It's one of those articles that just reads like AI slop to me. It reads like it was written by a large language model, but they're talking about Gianpiero Matarazzo, former audio review lab engineer, who they're breaking down what he says are problems with speaker design and, you know, why old speakers are great and new speakers suck. I'm not sure he would agree with that assessment, but
it's hard to figure out.
It is really hard to figure out, but, you know, again, that just sort of gives credence to my theory that this is all written by large language models that are being fed, you know, hey, here's a video, go write an article about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's every piece of evidence that we find from them makes me think that I'm right. But anyway, we're going to deconstruct this thing and talk about whether there's any validity to any of it. And that means not only, you know, Gianpiero's supposed assessment here, but whether or not Headphone Sty is accurately describing it.
I still am not sure. I mean, I dug deep into this guy's oeuvre. I guess I would have to meet him. Boy, oh boy. But it was interesting, and there's some good speakery stuff to talk about here.
What do you want to talk about this week, man?
Psych, beach gaze, rock.
That's a whole other podcast, man. Are we going to start that podcast or not?
No.
Are we going to have the first Audio Unleashed side project?
No, we'll have to settle for our special guest this week, who is Doug Schneider, the publisher, chief editor, something of Soundstage. Very well-established site that's going on, 30 years now? And close to 30 years. Yeah, I think 29 years. And
I've been with them for 5 years now, by the way. Can you believe it's been 5 years? Yeah, crazy.
And I wrote for him for a long time. And anyway, we're going to talk about you, about your appearance on the Hi-Fi 5 podcast where you got your ass handed to you. And
oh man, I love it.
And so Doug and I are going to dissect that and figure out what you did wrong.
There you go. I love it. I'm going to get educated. And then we've got a video from New Record Day. Boy, a lot of people sent us this link. So Paul Widner, one of our patrons, as well as another patron, Gregory Eiding, sent us this link. Paul said, like, hey guys, I thought you might check out this video on the audio power process. And Gregory said, might be an interesting topic for the pod. GR Research power conditioning power cables tested by Ron from New Record Day with testing and analysis. So in this video, New Record Day, the dude sort of was like, hey, I've never believed in power conditioners and power cords, and I set out to prove with science that it's all crap. And the results were spectacular, you know? So, the thing about it is, what he did that I would say is different from most people who make these sorts of, I was skeptical, but I've had a conversion experience, is he detailed his methodology. And what that did was left him open to criticism for his methodology. So I think we're going to look into his methodology and maybe have some commentary on whether it was sound and whether this test actually reveals what he thinks it reveals.
And then for our Patreon segment, we are going to look at Positive Feedback, which is a publication that's been around, as long as I can remember. They had their 2025 Writers Awards. And I'm going down it. I'm kind of like, usually you find these things and it's like, yeah, that's fine. Or yeah, that's a little wacky. But there were a couple things in here. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Look at this stuff. It was just so far out there. We're going to talk about a couple of awards that probably were well advised, but then there's some of the stuff where it's like, oh, what are they thinking? Oh my God. But we're going to discuss. We will for Patreons.
Absolutely. Let's start with this Headphone Sty article, though, man.
All right.
Yet again. So this article is by Andy G, supposedly. I'm more and more convinced every article we come across that this is written by a large language model, but I can't prove that. And so I'm not going to die on that hill. But this new piece, again, as I said, titled Veteran Speaker Designer Reveals the Top 3 Reasons Why Designers Can't Build Great Speakers Anymore. And I'm going to say right off the bat, well, that's ridiculous because I hear a lot of great speakers all the time, right? So, yeah, and I don't even know if the designer in question, Gian-Piero Matarazzo, would agree that there's, no good speakers designed anymore. But I don't know, maybe we just go through, since you and I are kind of looking at this going, I can't tell if they're accurately summarizing his opinions or not. Maybe we just go through the reasons. First things first, he says, go ahead.
Let me point something out here that you may not realize is, and they don't explain this in here, is that this Gian-Piero, and it's 2 words, Gian, G-I-A-N, Piero, P-E-E-R-O, Matarazzo, is a reviewer for AV Magazine in Italy under the name GP Matarazzo. So he does reviews, okay? And, let's just give this guy a little cred right now. I'm looking at a Sonus Faber Lumina 2 review. He's got measurements in here, and he's using a Melissa, which is the same as John Atkinson still uses, which was built back, one of the original FFT-based measurement rigs, but he's got a lot of measurements in here, and he seems to know what to do with them. He actually analyzes the crossover in the speaker and talks about the component choice and all this kind of stuff. So this guy is smart, okay? This guy is not one of these, trust your ears kind of people.
Yeah.
Which I would not have guessed from reading the Headphone Sty article.
There's so much intermingling between paraphrasing what he said and then interjecting their own editorializing,
which is their modus operandi at Headphone Sty.
Yeah. So the first reason that he supposedly gives for why nobody can design a good speaker anymore is over-reliance on measurements. So they sort of linked to a talk that he gave at Roma High Fidelity, in which he was talking about a Technique speaker that they measured years ago, and it was like ruler flat from 28 hertz to 25 kilohertz within half a dB. And he said, it could have been calibration for measurement microphones, and instrumentally it was fabulous, Matarazzo said in an interview with Velit Luna, but the sound wasn't great. And then they go on to say, this obsession with perfect measurements ignores how acoustics is an imperfect science filled with countless variables. And it's really easy to get onto that and go, well, wait, there are problems with what you're saying, but let's back up, because there's this pervasive notion that people who are into measurements just look at, the on-axis frequency response, and if it was flat, they were like, yeah, perfect, which what they don't address here, and what he doesn't talk about in the video, which I tried to watch, but it was like, YouTube is doing this thing now where if you're in a foreign language, they automatically overdub you with the AI, and I don't know how to get back to the original language. I couldn't understand Italian to begin with, so I don't know if even the translation is an accurate interpretation of what he's saying, but okay, so it measured ruler flat on axis. What is the dispersion like? What is the sound power across the entire listening window like? Because that matters far more than a ruler flat frequency response from 28 hertz to 25 kilohertz. So if they were doing any sort of responsible journalism here and if they actually were the experts in the field that they're trying to pretend to be here, they would have brought that point up. Okay, but what about off axis, right? That's meaningless. But they go into this weird sort of quasi-intellectual editorializing of their own, where they're like, room positioning, phase behavior, and cable characteristics all affect the sound. Okay, but that's not what he was talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it's one tick mark in the column of, I think they're misinterpreting what this guy is saying, but I don't speak Italian, so I can't confirm that 100%.
Yeah, it's very hard to, I looked at the translation of some of his stuff, and they're talking about how he built the magazine, which looks like a pretty credible publication. I'm not familiar with it, but it looks pretty cred. They're talking about how he built some reference speakers. And there's actually an article in here, which we'll link to. And it talks about how fourth order crossovers, they look perfect on paper. But, and it's fourth order. It's going to go through 360 degrees of phase shift and everything, but you can still make it line up just fine. There's lots of high order filters in very high end speakers, right? But then he talks about how he switched to first order filters. The thing about first order filters is that you can make them work. I mean, Jim Teal did. The problem is, first of all, the drivers overlap a lot, right? So they cause comb filter effects. So they cause lobing, vertical lobing. So if you raise your head, the sound will change. And, if they're not designed right, then also you have a lot of, distortion, and you tend to blow tweeters because you have a 6 dB per octave filter on the tweeter, and a lot of tweeters can't handle that. And Jim Teal fixed this through, designing a very weird tweeter / mid-range that actually had a mechanical crossover, kind of like a wizard cone. And then, Richard Vandersteen, basically on his cheap speakers, cheap is less expensive, the 2 and 3 ways, he doesn't solve it, but his 4 and 5 way speakers, once you get more drivers in there, it works. And so you can solve these problems. But if you do a 2-way speaker, in my opinion, there's just no way you're going to solve these problems. And especially if it's a flat baffle. Okay, if you look at Teals and Vandersteens, they tilt back so that the acoustic centers of the drivers are all the same, right? So the tweeter is the same distance from you as the woofer. If you put them on a flat baffle, the tweeter is going to be closer to your ears than the acoustic center of the woofer. So the tweeter is going to hit you first. It is not going to be in phase the way you want it. So as the late Mark Ailing put it to me from Paradigm, those work really good if you sit on the floor.
Nice. Very nice.
So I'm kind of like, but I still see people make this mistake. It's like, hey, if you want to build those speakers that way, and you want to cross them over to a subwoofer, and you want to put a really bulletproof tweeter in there, and you want to tilt the baffle back, that is fine. But let's face it, that is how first order filters work.
Yeah.
And if you if you just slap them in there and put a first order filter in, your speaker's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. But you'll have a marketing, angle that you go, we use first order. That's good marketing tagline.
Yeah, so. And most people still fall for it.
Yeah. So reason number two that they list is lack of real listening experience, which is, I have a problem with this one. And again, I don't know if this was just an offhand comment by Matarazzo or if this is something he truly believes in, but they say the second fatal flaw in modern speaker design is cultural rather than technical. Too many designers approach speakers as engineering problems rather than musical instruments. Well, they're not musical instruments. I'm sorry.
They're not.
That's just ridiculous. Why would you? I mean, that would. There's such a non sequitur. I don't even know where to begin unpacking it. But then they quote him as saying, "Engineers design objects for music, but don't listen to music." Matarazzo stated bluntly, "I have never seen an engineer, except for a few exceptions, truly listen." That's just a claim that is
false,
out of nowhere. Where is it even coming from?
False, completely false. I know a zillion speaker engineers. I don't know any of them that aren't passionate about music. Not a single one of them. Yeah. Even the most, measurement-oriented ones are still passionate about music. That's why they got into this. They didn't get into this because they loved speakers, right?
Yeah.
And he starts, these designers started from a genuine passion for music and then built serious technical skills on top of it. No, I would say probably every speaker designer is started that way. And, show me evidence, name the speaker designers who, who came out of school with slide rule or whatever, and never listened to music and don't attend music performances and don't have record collections and stuff like that. Name them for me, please.
Yeah.
They lack a fundamental listening experience is what this article says. Again, we don't know what this guy is saying because he said it obviously in Italian. And I do have to say, though, that reading these articles in Italian phonetically is a fun exercise because it makes everything sound funny. because, let me see if I can do this. Probabilmente un marchio conosciuto da tutti il mondo audiofilo. C'è si imposto di attenzione mondiale.
That's a spicy meatball.
That's the thing. Is like, as an American, you can't help but read this stuff and do it in that kind of accent. So it's always good. It's really it makes the whole thing much more lighthearted. I'm sure he doesn't talk like that, but you never know. I'd love to meet this guy. I probably never will because I don't go to audio shows anymore. But I bet you he pops in at the Vienna show.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So reason 3, cost cutting over sound quality. I have a question for you, buddy. They don't quote him as much in this section as I think they should, and they put a lot of words in his mouth. But I want to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
You have tested a lot of very, very, very low-priced speakers lately.
Mm-hmm.
I've tested a few, nowhere near as many as you have, but a few.
That's all I test now. Yeah.
Have you seen any of them that only use 2 screws on the woofer?
No, this is just bizarre. Like, it's like whoever wrote this article, have you never looked at a woofer? I mean, I've got really cheap speakers probably like right behind me. Give me 2 secs. Hang on.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to read what they say. One huge example he gave was the 4 versus 2 screws scenario. As to like calling it a scenario makes it true. They say mounting a woofer properly requires 4 screws for best performance. The extra screws ensure even pressure around the driver flame, blah, 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 blah. To accountants, though, 2 screws cost less than 4, maybe saving 50 cents per speaker. Multiply that by thousands of units and someone's spreadsheet looks better. Okay, but what model of speaker is only using 2 screws on the woofer? Name
None.
The speaker. Name it. And they're not doing it.
Right behind me, I happen to have a Mika RB42X, which I have to say is one hell of a good $100 a pair speaker. And $100 a pair, 4 screws on the woofer. And I got to say, 4 is a bare minimum. I mean, most speakers, as you step up, are going to have 6 or 8.
Or an odd number,
I can't imagine this guy said this, although he does say supposedly he says, today the designer must obey the economist, but when was that not the case?
Yeah.
Probably less so now that you have Chinese manufacturing and stuff can get made cheap.
I think it really boils down to one point. There's a sentence where they do actually quote him, and he says, your whole philosophy and study collapse miserably against the fact that 4 screws cost more than 2. I don't think he was actually claiming that anybody's building speakers with 2 screws on the woofer. I think he was just saying that if you cut your material costs in half, then that your accountants are going to want to do that. But I think he was speaking figuratively, and they took him literally and tried to make it as if that was his entire argument. But, that is exactly, again, getting out over my skis here. I have no proof, but I will simply say that is the sort of mistake that large language models make.
Yeah. And also, I got to say that I have seen woofers with 3 screws. You can't see them with 2 because it's not going to seal. I mean, the woofer has to seal in the box. And I can only think of a couple of times I've seen something with just 3 screws. I mean, just once or twice. I mean, even on these Mika speakers, even the tweeters have 4 screws.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. I think we should end this discussion by just reading their conclusion. And here's the conclusion. Ultimately, great speakers happen when passionate listeners use engineering knowledge to serve musical goals. They don't happen when engineers treat music as an academic exercise that needs perfect measurements and accounting department approval.
Oh, God.
What does that first part even mean, to serve musical goal? Like, what engineers are just being like, I don't care about, serving musical goal. It's absolute rubbish. It's just noise, man.
Well, what are the musical goals? I mean, just to sound like the music does. I mean, it's all just same old emotional crap.
And which engineers are treating music as an academic exercise that needs perfect measurements and accounting department approval? Look, who are these people, to quote Jerry Seinfeld?
Well, I got to say, a lot of musicians treat it as an academic exercise. But I just have to say, but actually I would say I can probably name more musicians that treat it as an academic exercise than engineers. I got to say that if Gian Piero Matarazzo is listening, we would be delighted to have you on here, especially if you do it in Italian and have a translator, because that would make it even cooler. That would be super cool. But we would love to have you on here to present your point of view, which we think is probably much, 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 much smarter and more informed than what Headphone Sty made you out to be.
I think that's highly likely. So anyway, I don't have anything else to say about this one, buddy. You want to take a break and get some water and come back and talk to Doug?
Make it happen.
All right, we'll be right back, y'all.
And we're back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
Nice. That one had some bite. I need to work on my bite.
Had a lot more cut than Dennis's voice.
Doesn't have the depth of voice, though. I'm not getting it that deep.
Didn't lull me to sleep like Dennis usually does.
Oh, wow. Man. It's, okay, I'm going to have to rethink my life choices now if I'm lulling people to sleep.
I think we all need to.
As we mentioned in the intro, we are joined in this segment by my publishing overlord, Doug Schneider of Stage Network. And we're going to talk about, I guess you would say, a trap that was set for me that I sprung. Would that be? I said, am I being uncharitable right out of the gate? So
might have been a bit of a trap, I think. I listened to it. Maybe not.
Brent, you're going to be a little more unbiased than I am. So what are we talking about here?
So the Hi-Fi 5, which is I guess you call it a podcast, but they have video, which maybe someday we will, but I don't know. Once we figure out how to do it. Anyway, they had you on as a guest based on an article that you wrote for Soundstage that was about audio kayfabe or something like that, which is like a wrestling thing, which is, I'm already way out of my element.
Dude, the whole story was your idea. It was literally your idea.
I didn't come up with the term kayfabe.
Well, no, but I was talking about it on Audio Unleashed, and I was is this like a kayfabe thing? Is this like wrestling fans have to pretend to believe in it? And you're like, that's your next article. And I was like,
oh, okay.
All right.
There you go. Well, hey, man, you owe me some thanks because it got you on the Hi-Fi 5.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. So, but yeah, they reached out and they were like, hey, come on the show to discuss. And I'm like, all right. And I texted Doug about it, and Doug was like, this seems like a trap. And I'm like, okay, let's spring the trap. And he's like, sure. Yeah, go ahead. So, but anyway, we should mention right off the bat, the Hi-Fi 5 is pretty new. I was the guest on the 6th episode. So the Hi-Fi 5 is there are 4 regulars. And it is Jay from Jay's Audio Lab, who sells pre-owned gear and reviews audio. Elliot with Bending Wave USA, high-end audio distributor. Danny with
dealer too, right? Is he a dealer too? I was trying to
retailer. Yeah, okay. Danny K with Sonic Flare. He's an EMM Labs advisor. I don't quite know what that means, but he's audio and music reviewer. And then Ron Resnick, who runs the What's Best Forum and is a Clarisys audio dealer and an audio reviewer. And then the 5th chair rotates every episode. So, and I think they're probably going to have a Mr. Brent Butterworth on pretty soon.
It's been discussed, but I didn't. I said okay, but I didn't hear anything back. But
okay,
maybe they probably didn't know who I am, and then they probably looked at what I do, and they're kind of like, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know, man. I never know how high end audio dudes are going to react to me. So some of them are really skeptical. But then some of them are, God, I met Harry Pearson once, and I thought oh, he's going to hate me. He was just just completely accepting and nice and wonderful. Yeah. So, you just never know.
And you know about the Floyd Toole and Harry Pearson connection that Floyd talks about in his talks now? Back in the day
I can't
when,
remember.
okay, Floyd talks about it openly. Back in the day when Floyd was showing all kinds of measurements and doing all the NRC stuff, and he ended up at Harry's place. Harry wanted to make Taz into a measurements-based science publication, but only if he could have Floyd's work exclusively. And Floyd said, no, of course not. And so then it went off in the direction.
So then Harry decided to go a completely opposite direction.
Exactly.
That's the kind of it. We need more integrity like that.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
He's committed to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, question for you both, because I came out of this episode just thinking I had failed spectacularly, and you both had somewhat different takes than that. Let me sort of explain what I mean when I sort of say that I failed spectacularly. I went into this thinking that if there was one thing that I could do, it would be to sort of demonstrate to these purely subjectivist guys, the purely spooky feely vibes guys, that those of us who are more objectivists are not arrogant. We're not certain. In fact, if anything, we are less certain about our own observations, and we think everybody's fallible, including ourselves. And we think, if you're going to be spending hundreds or thousands of dollars, maybe it just shouldn't be based on one person's opinion. Maybe it shouldn't be like, Brent, what you used to call one asshole's opinion, right? And measurements.
I never said that. Did I say that?
You did, yeah. It was, it was back when we were with Home Theater Review. That was a term that you used. So,
well, I would.
You were talking about yourself.
I would say
you were talking about
really?
yourself.
Okay,
like, yeah, you said one asshole's opinion.
I wouldn't talk about other people like that. I'd call them like schmagaggies or something.
Yeah. So I wanted to just show them that, like, look, this is not an arrogant thing. This is not, science gives me certainty. It's just like, look, we're talking about music. We're talking about passion. Emotions are involved. How can you listen to music without being emotional? And the measurements and things like that are one tool that we can use to sort of cut through our own biases and also sort of help readers determine like whose opinion is going to have more weight for me when I'm sort of factoring in all of these decisions about, what gear to buy. And I just feel like I left that recording having spectacularly failed at that, because they almost more doubled down on the whole, well, this guy's arrogant and he thinks he knows everything thing. And I just like, man, like, what could I have done better to sort of convey the objectivist opinion? And I don't know, maybe that's the wrong metric to use, but I just felt like I completely failed in that respect.
We were listening to it I was in Norway with the video guy. So Christian Jordan, a host of our podcast, and we were listening to it. And at the end of it all, and I said, hey, Dennis came out of that okay, considering the circumstances. He's in an unenviable position. You're not going to convince them. You're not going to start kind of screaming like Danny did. And I think you did pretty well. And I just said, wow, I would have made 2 points. He didn't. But I really liked the point you made when you came to say, spend as much as you want on transducers. I thought that was a really good point. They're kind of like, because, hey, transducers make a huge difference. Huge variability in those things. So I think you came out quite well, and you didn't look arrogant at all. I don't think. Yeah. In fact, a couple of them kind of were making arguments. I'm like, ooh, this is pretty easy to shoot down. We can talk about that in a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought, the thing is that you're not going to, as we all well know, as probably everybody listening to this well knows, you're not going to get people to abandon their baked in opinions by presenting them with, rationality. And, this is, especially with audio, there's so much personal identity baked into this, right? Part of their personal identity is they are audiophiles, and they know how to listen to music, and they know they are not among the unwashed masses. They are refined men of culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And their personal identities baked into it. They're not going to go like, oh, wow, I guess I'm not that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't think, look, I had no delusions of going in and changing their opinions about their own points of view. I just wanted them to understand my point of view better. And I felt like I came out of it like with them just not understanding me at all. Well, Danny did. I mean, Danny was on my side in this argument. I mean, he was, in fact, he was a lot more forceful about it than I was, but defending, science. but yeah, it just, I felt like, especially at some point, Jay stopped talking to me and started talking about me. Like he had so dismissed me as a completely arrogant butthole that I was just like, beneath his contempt, right? He just wasn't even going to talk to me anymore. He was just going to say, "Oh, the dentist thinks," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm right here." So that's one thing I wish I'd done better, is sort of fought for the perspective that I have, that it's like, nobody is infallible. Nobody has golden ears. Nobody has this perfect ability to hear everything, and whatever. It's like we're all subject to our own biases, our own perceptions. Like we've said a million times on this show, you throw me an amp with a VU meter, and I'm automatically going to like it more than one without. But am I going to in a blind test? Of course not. So if you are using pure sound quality as a metric for why you buy an amp, my VU meter fetish is not going to do anything for you. But if you dig VU meters too, well, you're going to be on my side. But again, it's like, it's not up to me to tell somebody that VU meters are a valid reason to buy an amp or a good volume control or whatever. All I can do is sort of give my experiences and then have the objective measurements and the objective criteria as a way to go, okay, let's do a sanity check, right? That's the thing. It's the sanity check, and that's the thing that I just couldn't get them to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens too is the experience is important, because what happens, I don't know if it happened with you guys, but as you start doing this seriously, within about the first 5 to 8 years, you know everything like there is on the planet. And then realize after, well, maybe you don't know everything. You're willing to know everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where Dennis said. Now, do you want me to jump in where I think Jay went right and also very wrong on
Sure,
this?
please. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll tell you the story. Okay, I was impressed with Jay when he said, something about let's test this, and he says, bring it on. And I actually believed that he would subject himself to a test. The way he said, bring it on, bring it on. He seemed to be sincere. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But where he went wrong, and in my opinion, completely backwards on the power cord thing. They seem to dwell on the $10,000 power cord, right? That seems to be a hot answer. And it's unclear what they think a $10,000 power cord will do, but I have ideas what it could do. But and this is why I think he got it completely backwards in his thinking, and why I don't automatically crap on power cords. So we're talking before I did Soundstage. So about 1990, I had a friend, Ron. Ron was really technically competent. If he could not build an amplifier, he could at least fix one. Get in there and repair it. And I brought home a high-end power cord, and I said, hey, I borrowed from the store, and I said, Ron, and he said, let's test this out. And his words were, this is a load of bull. And I said, well, let's try it out. Right? I borrowed it from the store. And so I put it on what was called a Forte amp. It came out of Threshold. It was the cheap Threshold line, bare bones amp. And it was unmistakable for whatever reason. When it was plugged into this cord, the hiss was about a quarter of what it was, like the self noise of the amp. And Ron went, that thing just dropped the noise floor of the amp. And it could be lousy wiring in my house. It could be something interfering, but you could unplug it and plug it and hear the thing hiss with a normal thing and barely hiss with this thing on it. And it was just a very shielded cord, and I think a ferrite core on it, stuff like that. And so I never completely dismiss. Flash forward to many years later, and when I go to these companies, I'm always talking to the engineers and asking them. And I won't name this company, but they do a lot of electronics engineering, very high-end stuff, and some moderately lower price stuff. And I said, have you ever found anything with these power cords? And they were showing me where they test their amps, susceptibility to noise and power lineage. They got machines to simulate bad lines. Okay. And they said, in some of our lesser amps, they don't have the power supply filtration as our most expensive amps. And if a power cord is somehow filtering something, it could benefit the lower price stuff if it's doing that. And they said it's not going to do a thing to the expensive stuff. Not a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Which, if you notice, Jay fell into something I made a video about months ago called the most pathetic excuse in high-end audio. Your system isn't resolving enough. They automatically gravitate that. Well, to me, if that power chord can only be heard on that really, really expensive amp, maybe that expensive amp has some problems.
Yeah.
Because if anything, it should benefit the cheapest stuff. Not the most expensive stuff. And somebody puts a power chord and says, wow, that revolutionized my amp. I would be saying, what's wrong with your amp?
Yeah. But, you know, here, the thing I wanted to respond to you there, Doug, is, and you might be surprised by how much I agree with you here, but like, when you described the difference that power chord made on that amp, you described it in very concrete, measurable terms. The noise floor, right?
Yeah.
That is something that could be tested, and anybody could go, here's the, yes, this is the difference that it made. Maybe it's something to do with shielding, maybe it's something to do with noise rejection, whatever, but this is a quantifiable difference. But what frustrates me is when you ask someone, like, what difference are you expecting this to make? And it's just like, oh, you're asking for evidence. You're asking for proof. You've made up your mind that there's no difference. It's like, no. I'm asking you, like, how it works. What is the mechanism? And what actual difference does it make? Noise floor difference? Okay. I mean, that is something that we could test easily.
And here.
Oh, I feel that there was more emotional content to the violin with this. Like, how do we know you're not just making stuff up, right? Like, that's
it's
always
really
the question.
unclear. It's really unclear what they think this power chord is doing. If it is providing some sort of filtration that they have a problem with their line or something like that, great. But what do they think? Like imagine the award you'd get in physics to be able to predict the electron flow through that power cord, through that amplifier, to change the sound in a certain way to make it more emotionally involving.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine. I don't get what they're thinking that chord is going to do.
Yeah. How many of these people have any comprehension of electrical theory? I mean, very, very, very few of them. I mean, I was lucky enough to, in high school, have an electronics class, and we built a power supply. And people who claim to be experts on audio and who are punditing about audio should be able to draw you a basic schematic of a linear power supply so that you can see that they understand how it works. Like, they don't understand the notion of a filter capacitor, right? It's like one of the three fundamental elements of a power supply, and they act as if those aren't even in there. Like, a manufacturer might not put that in there. It's like, it's just so it's so lightweight to me, and that's what I really can't stand. It's like people just believe in all this magic stuff without ever taking the trouble to learn how these things actually work.
Yeah, and it's unclear, like, what they think is improving, like you said,
and
Dennis. And that's why I don't crap on power chords, because maybe in some system this chord does have some sort of shielding or filter or something, right? But they're unclear.
Let me give you an example of a recent issue with power supplies with me. Like, I was doing testing for Wirecutter's updated guide to Bluetooth receivers and transmitters. At one point, I ended up with one with a really, really short cord. It had like a 1.5 foot power cord, right? So at some point, I thought, okay, I'm going to just plug these. I'm going to plug this into the back of my SVS powered speakers, right, or active speakers, and see what's going on here. And it's just immediate noise, right? You could hear like my Wi-Fi interfering with it. You could hear my lamp, right? I turn off my lamp, and all of a sudden it gets less noisy, right? It's very, very clear what's going on, and at no point am I just like, oh, there's some mystical emotional content. It's just, you immediately know, right? And the point that I'm making here is, I get frustrated when people are like, oh, you just have to know how to listen, right? No, you're not trained in listening. So the implication is, oh, Dennis, you just don't know how to listen the way I do. You're not listening for the same things I do. But I'm just like, no, if there's a problem, it's obvious. Anybody can hear it, right? And that's another point of frustration for me is I keep running into the younger kids who are like oddly getting into audio, which is a hopeful thing to me, but they even fall back on this old truism of, well, I'm not an audiophile, so I don't know. But then you actually talk to them about what they're hearing, and they can hear the differences. They've just been convinced that there are differences that their ears don't have access to by a bunch of old guys who probably can't hear above 8K, right? So this crap about like, oh, you've got to learn how to listen. You've got to learn. It's a skill. It's an earned skill. It's like, no, it's not. Are you just trying to protect your own turf or elevate yourself as an expert? I get like I'm specifically talking about Elliot here. Like I got really frustrated with his whole like, I'm tired of talking about your article crap, but you invited me on. But then there's repeated insistence that he knew how to listen and I didn't.
And there was the other thing when he said I could bring you into the store and I'm sure he's sincere and prove to you that there's a difference. I would have turned around and said, bring me into your store and let's prove you can hear a difference before I have to. Because all these guys, I used to hate walking into CD and stuff. Here, listen to my USB cable. You can hear a difference, right? And I turn around at one point and say, no, let's prove you can hear the difference. Let's do it to you.
That's a really good philosophy.
We're going to be talking about that in another segment, Doug, another guy who did, A/B testing on power cables and, to put out these samples and 72% of people said they heard a difference. But literally the questionnaire was, did you hear the difference? And 72% of people were like, yes, I did. It's like, there's no control, no ABX, nothing, just self-reported. Did you hear a difference? Well, if you're asking people, do you hear the difference, especially in the domain of audiophilia, people are very embarrassed to say, no, I didn't hear the difference, because that would be in their world an admission that, oh, I'm not as good a listener. I'm not as trained. If I were a better golden-eared audiophile, I would be able to hear the difference. So of course they're going to self-report hearing the difference.
Well, and there's also Schneider's maxim, which we frequently quote here on Audio Unleashed.
I don't even know
which is, no, you've said this multiple times, which is, if you're trying to make a technical statement and you say you measured something, they'll never accept it no matter how much evidence you present. Whereas some guy can say he heard something and it's absolutely always legitimate.
Well, everybody, we're going to take a break, get a drink of water, and come back and talk about some other crazy stuff. So, Doug, thanks again for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.
Hey, you're welcome. Yeah, enjoyed it.
All right, we'll be right back, y'all. And welcome back. This is Audio Unleashed. Nice. So this time around, as we said in the intro, we're talking about a video that a few of our patrons sent to us, but we're not doing this one in our Patreon segment because I feel like more people need to be exposed to this.
Yeah.
So this came from Paul Widner and from Gregory Eiding, two of our patrons, and they both linked to the video and said, like, they didn't sort of like give any prejudgment. It was really more just like, hey, thought you should check this out. And hey, I'd like to hear your opinions on this. So I really kind of didn't know going in like what I was in for. But this new video from New Record Day called I Tried to Debunk Power Chords and Conditioners and Failed Spectacularly. So New Record Day is a guy named Ron who is friends with Danny Ritchie from GR Research. Was it a couple of weeks ago or a week ago or something like that? He had sort of done this A/B video thing. He's like, hey, I've got these samples and I want you guys to listen and tell me if you can hear the difference between A and B. And one thing is different between them. I just changed one variable, right? And then in this video, he reveals, the variable that I changed was I switched from, plugging my amplifier straight into the wall to using this Uber bus with GR Research power cords. That was the switch that I made. And 72% of you said that you could hear a difference, which, okay, as I said before, man, you ask audiophiles, can you hear the difference between these two? And they're going to tell you yes. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have guessed 72% would tell you yes, but I would have guessed a strong majority would tell you yes, because nobody wants to admit, no, I can't hear the difference between these two. They sound the same. It goes on to just go completely off the rails with this methodology here, in my opinion. And I don't want to, prejudge too much, but basically the way he sort of determined that there is a real meaningful difference between these two is, so he recorded with his microphone in his room, his speakers playing, 4 different music clips. And then he uploaded those files to ChatGPT, whom he calls Nora in this case, and got ChatGPT to analyze the differences between them. And what Nora revealed was that, B every time was just so much better, right? Less smeared mid-range or whatever. He says at one point, Nora didn't search the internet. She didn't read the metadata. She didn't get clues or hints. She analyzed the waveform, period. That's not up for debate. Well, buddy, I got to tell you, that's up for debate because, you have not demonstrated to my satisfaction that Nora did anything meaningful other than sort of what ChatGPT normally does, which is kind of tell you what you want to hear. These large language models are notorious for telling you what you want to hear. There's this common trend now where people are going, hey, I've got a business idea. Do you think this is a good idea? And ChatGPT is like, oh, you're a genius. That is the best business idea anybody's ever had. I guarantee you 100% you're going to make $1 gazillion. And there's a trend now where people are just losing their asses by asking ChatGPT, should I invest all of my money into this? And ChatGPT is going, well, obviously you're the smartest human being in the world, so why wouldn't you do that? That's a brilliant idea. So no, that is up for debate. I'm sorry. Asking ChatGPT to analyze 2 audio samples and tell you what's going on, no.
Yeah.
What they should have done from the get-go is what you recommended, which was what?
Well, there's actually a bunch of things. If you're going to do a test like this, well, great. But you don't do it by recording your speakers in a room. Turn on a spectrum analyzer and set the floor for, 0 dB SPL. I mean, the lowest noise situation you can find is an anechoic chamber, which is 10 dB SPL or something. And a typical room is more like a good room, maybe 35 dB SPL of noise. And you'll see it. It's right there. But we don't hear it because we live in it all the day and we just ignore it.
Wow.
So there's a lot of noise. And also just, you've done tons of recording, right? You're in what seems to be a quiet room, you record voice or guitar or something, and you play it back. It's like, where's all this noise coming from? That's one giant flaw in his methodology. I actually tried to kind of replicate his thing. And I thought, okay, well, let's try it with an amplifier, right? And I have an Outlaw M2200 monoblock I tried. And I had a really big, fat Krell power cord. And I used a generic power cord. But, I hooked up a load resistor to the amplifier. And then I paralleled it off into my sound card and recorded that, right? Which means I didn't have any speakers. It's basically a very loud line level signal, but you turn it down and it records just fine. And, the amp has the low resistor on it, so it's not freaking out. And, I'm sorry, audio pundit people that are presenting themselves as experts, you should know this.
Yeah.
So that really annoyed me. And I just wanted to see, because I saw which we'll talk about is the errors in the files that you found. And I thought, how good can I get it? And I got it to where, the best I was able to get was about 1/6, comparing it using a bit comparator. The best I was able to get was I got it about 6 times better than he did.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
His process, whatever it was, introduced noise. All right. So where were we? I have so much to talk about here.
Well, I was asking you what your methodological recommendation was.
Okay, well, there's part of it.
When you and I were discussing whether we were going to do this.
But I thought, so I downloaded all the files. I listened to them, and I'm kind of like, I think I hear a difference. But, I've been doing what I call ABCD tests. There's two kinds of blind tests. There's ABX, which is where you listen to A, you listen to B, and then X randomly is either A or B. And you pick whether you think X is A or B, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also just ABCD or AB, whatever, blind tests where you compare two things, and it's blind. You don't know which is which. I published more of these in certainly every American audio publication ever. And the only guy who would come close to me is Tom Hussein. It's real easy in an AB or ABCD test with 4 different things. You'll hear a difference. Just as Doug was saying, you listen to 2 things, and if you think there's a difference, you'll hear a difference, right?
Yeah.
So what I did was I took his files and I put them into FooBar 2000, which has an ABX feature, right? And so you could do the files, put both files in there, go back and forth between them, and then it actually gives you X and Y. But I ignore the Y. He has got 5 different files in here, and I went through all of them and I ABX'd them. I did 8 trials with each file, and out of the 40 trials total, I got 21 out of 40 correct. The best I did on the Jack Johnson, I got 7 out of 8, which that's statistically significant. Although it still could have been lucky guesses, but maybe I actually did hear something there. I don't really know. But I gotta say, he recorded them with mics in a room, and it's not surprising to me that you could hear a difference there because of noise he doesn't even realize is going on. But then he talks about Danny came over, who manufactures these products or sells them, and they listened with just the preamp. But it's like they kind of go back like, oh, we didn't hear a difference, but we did hear a difference. And then the Chat GPT found no difference, but then it found a difference. It's just like,
it's like if you don't like the results you get, keep trying it, and eventually you will get the results that you want. So
yeah, but I just have to say, I'm listening to this, and it's like, could I hear a difference? I mean, just as with my ABX tests of amps that I've done, and I own an ABX box, which I paid $1,000 for, and that was 10 or 12 years ago. And as soon as I found it was available, I immediately ordered one. I have serial number 3.
Nice.
So I was right on top of it and spent my $1,000. And honestly, I did it because I thought I'm going to prove amps sound different. But I did not. But you always think, I hear a difference. And then you look at your results and you're like, yeah, maybe I didn't hear a difference. And that's something I wish more of these people would do. But, with FooBar, with files like this, anybody who's listening to this, if you want to try this test, download his files, put them into FooBar. Free. It's free, and you got to download the ABX extension for it. It's all free. It's very, very easy to use. You can set this up in 2, 3, 4 minutes,
I'm trying to find where I saved. I did the ABX in FooBar and I saved my results, but I didn't look at them. I'm trying. Oh, here they are. I figured out where I saved them. So you get to find out in real time what my results were. I only did 3 of the songs and I did 16 tests each. So let's see. The first one, Where There Is Smoke by Dominic Fields and Me. Scroll. I did 16. I got 9 of them right. The next one I did was When by Patty Larkin. I got 8 of 16 right with a p-value of 0.59. The Pot by Tool. I got 7 of 16 right. P-value of 0.7, which basically means like the results are just pure chance, right? Yeah. Even if you didn't have the 7 of 16 result. I mean, I was one I got 7, one I got 8, one I got 9. So it's like I averaged 50% accuracy, but my p-values are so high, it's like that doesn't mean anything,
Well, and you would get by flipping a coin. If you did enough coin flips and did enough trials, you would get 50% accuracy. And so some people say, "Well, I heard a difference half the time." It's like, well, no, because I could have put on headphones and listened to, some psych beach gaze rock instead of this and just flipped a coin and done as good as you did.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you heard something. And the whole thing, honestly, what this felt like to me is it felt like when creationists try to disprove evolution, and they just cite all this. It's just this endless recitation of nonsense, and you're like, no,
irreducible complexity.
Yeah. No. And that's why this guy just drove me up the wall. Whereas actually with the Hi-Fi 5, I enjoyed listening to them.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't agree with them, but I enjoyed listening to them. I've actually listened to a couple of their other podcasts. It's pleasant to listen to. This was painful to me.
Yeah, because he's like, I have proved it with science. So I pulled these into Reaper as well and sort of did some loudness analysis on them. And there's just no consistency so in every case, A was the one with the stock power cable.
Yeah.
B was the one with this power conditioner and upgraded power cable. Although he said he only changed one variable. In fact, he changed two. So is it the power cable or is it the power conditioner? We don't know. But there's really no consistency. Sometimes the stock power cable has a little higher dynamic range. Sometimes it has less dynamic range. Sometimes it's a little louder, maybe half a dB. Sometimes it's a little quieter. Sometimes it's exactly the same. So it's like you look at this and there's no consistency to the LUFS values of the different samples. So, I mean, that was the first thing I thought. If the level matching's not good here, then, well, that could explain some differences. But the levels are just sort of all over the place and generally within half a dB, you know?
And he didn't change. I mean, of course, we can be confident that he did not change the levels of playback as he was doing all these recordings, unless he changed it from tune to tune, which would be fine. But I'm sure that the two files that he did of each tune are at the same playback level. But that's the problem, is you're recording them in a room with microphones, which means you can have variations in the noise that, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't overtly hear these things, but you hear them at some very low level. And like one of the people who commented on this thing said, look, if you tell people here's two things and they're different, well, of course they're going to hear a difference.
Yeah.
He says, the title of this thing is, I tried to debunk power chords and conditioners and failed spectacularly. The last three words of that I agree with. But, he did not debunk this. He basically showed that he did a test that doesn't really show anything. And the thing is, I really want to say, and I wanted to say this during the Doug segment too, is that, look, if you can hear noise, right? If things are making a difference in the noise, especially cables, right? You can measure that. I mean, it's I have a Clio, which is it's a good analyzer, but it's pretty low rent. I mean, I don't know what they cost now, but it was a few $1,000 when I bought it. And, audio precisions are even better. But even my Clio does, about up to 100, minus 115, minus 120 noise measurements, right? And if you figure that the loudest sound you're going to want to listen to is about 105 dB, and that's a peak, right? You might peak a little louder than that, but not much. And then the noise floor of your room, if it's a good room, it's going to be 35 dB SPL. And, in a more typical room, probably more like 45, 50, might even be higher. For you to hear this noise, which, I'm already looking at this noise, I'm already measuring, and it's down way below, the noise in the system that's coming off of the electronics is already way down to minus 100, minus 105, something like that, right? With any kind of decent stuff, maybe not tube stuff because it's noisier, but any kind of normal solid state stuff. And so it's like, wait a minute, I can't measure this noise, but you're hearing this noise. And I've already shown the noise is at least 110, 120 dB below full scale. And if full scale for you is 105, that means I'm hearing stuff at, 0 dB SPL, which is, 40 dB below your noise floor. Anybody can come along and say, oh, I hear this noise, or I hear more inner detail, or or the music sounds more relaxed, or whatever.
Yeah.
Anybody can say that, but this guy, he's done some work. At least he tried.
At least he detailed his methodology so we could pick it apart. I mean, that's not a lot of these guys do that.
Right.
You know?
And he did have a methodology, as opposed to, say, the Hi-Fi 5, where they just listen to stuff and they emotionally react to it and say the music sounds more relaxed. But, so let's give him credit for that. He did try, but you want to prove something? Don't have A always be the same thing. Flip A and B, and then see what kind of results you get. That would get, even if you don't want to do ABX, just flip A and B.
Yeah.
If you really want to prove something, ABX it or flip the order. And then don't say, these are different. Do you prefer A or B?
Anyway, but I think we've pretty much beaten this one into the ground.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it this week, bud. This is a Butterburger production. That means it's me and you doing it together.
It is.
Like Thelma and Louise driving off the cliff.
And we are actually I have a new composition I'm working on, but I will not finish it in time to edit. I don't think. If you hear something new, it's something I banged out.
Let's save it for Christmas, man. Let's save it for Christmas. Give our listeners a little Christmas treat, some new
cool.
Brent Butterworth
Maybe I'll
music.
bang out I have next week off and I have nothing to do, so maybe I'll just bang out some weird music. I'll do a year's worth of bumper music for the podcast.
Nice. What are you going to call that one?
Old CD Night.
Nice. Well, you can call it whatever you want, because you, sir, are editing and mixing and mastering this one. It's your turn.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug, by the way.
Yes, thank you, Doug. We always appreciate you having on. And I forgot to tell you, man, the Soundstage Audiophile podcast, which was, originally our podcast, is about to hit its 100th episode. And I'm putting you on the spot here. I pitched the idea to Doug and Jordan that you and I should come on for the 100th episode, and the four of us should have a conversation about how much the podcast has changed and evolved, and how we did it, and how Jordan does it. So what do you think?
That'd be great.
It?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
If they're game for it, I'd be happy. I've never met Jordan, so that'd be nice.
Oh, yeah, he's a really nice kid. You're going to like
That'd be good.
So, anyway, anything else to say about this one, or any other credits you want to give?
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And that's plenty right there. I mean, we really appreciate our listeners. It makes all of this worthwhile, and we really love the feedback that we get. So if you love what we do or hate what we do, please let us know. I mean, we are open to criticism, because it's only going to make us better.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. And as always, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. But patrons, stick around. We got one more for you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic, or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is, if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.